When I first heard it, I didn't understand the language. I couldn't grasp the meaning of the words. And yet I felt something I could not explain. The sound carried a weight, a rhythm, a breath that reached beyond the ears and went straight to the heart. It was not just a voice. It was as if the air itself was alive, moving with an ancient power. The rise and fall, the pauses between verses, they carried the silence of deserts, the depth of oceans, the eternity of the night sky. In that moment, I was no longer simply listening. I was being drawn in. There is something remarkable about sacred words. No matter where they come from, they have the ability to remind us of who we are, and more importantly, who we are not. They strip away arrogance. They call us to humility. They remind us that we are small. But that smallness is not weakness. It is a doorway to wonder. As I stood there, hearing the recitation, I felt an uncommon stillness. The world outside grew distant. The noise of life, the chaos, the endless rush, all of it faded. What remained was a presence, a reminder that beyond this fleeting existence there is something greater, something eternal. The words stirred not just thought, but feeling, a sense of reverence, a sense of awe, a sense of longing for understanding. Even without translation, it was as if the soul recognized something the mind could not yet name. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Faith is not about dividing us. It is about calling us back to silence, to gratitude, to peace. The words I heard were not mine, the tradition was not mine, and yet the effect, it belonged to us all. So when I recall the first time I heard the Qur'an, I do not remember simply a sound. I remember an encounter, a call to reflection, a reminder to respect what is sacred, in whatever form it reaches us. Because in the end, truth does not shout, it whispers. And if we dare to listen, it can change everything. When I first heard it, I wasn't searching for anything. I wasn't in a place of prayer, nor was I in a moment of deep reflection. Life was moving as it always does, fast, loud, filled with distractions, and then, almost unexpectedly, it reached me. A sound, unfamiliar, yet strangely familiar. A voice carrying words I did not know, but spoken with such strength, such certainty, such beauty, that everything else seemed to pause. It wasn't just a sound filling the air, it was a presence. The cadence moved like waves, rising and falling with a rhythm older than memory itself. Each note carried weight, and each silence between them carried even more. It felt as though the walls around me shifted, as though the air thickened, as though time slowed down, just enough for me to notice it. I remember the feeling more than anything else. My chest tightened, my skin tingled, and my thoughts, usually restless, fell still. The moment wasn't about understanding with the mind. It was about recognizing with the heart. It was as though something inside me had been waiting for that sound, waiting for that call, and the moment it arrived, it stood still in reverence. I did not know the meaning of the verses, yet they spoke louder than anything I could explain. It was not just language, it was something beyond language, a vibration that carried wisdom, longing, and a timeless call to something greater than myself. For that brief moment, I was not where I had been before. I was somewhere else, somewhere higher, somewhere quieter, somewhere truer. That was the encounter. Not an event, not a performance, but a moment of being touched by something far beyond me. And once you have felt it, even just once, you cannot forget it. The voice was unlike anything I had heard before. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forceful, yet it carried a strength that seemed unshakable. There was a rhythm to it, measured, deliberate, unhurried. Every syllable felt as though it had been placed with intention, as though the sound itself was chosen by something far beyond the speaker. It struck me how the voice seemed to move in two directions at once, outward into the world, filling the space around me, and inward into the deepest parts of myself. The tone was not merely recited, it was lived. It carried with it centuries of devotion, of longing, of faith. It wasn't just communication, it was connection. The cadence had a way of pulling you in, demanding nothing, yet leaving you unable to turn away. There was no need for instruments, no need for harmony or accompaniment. The purity of the human voice, shaped by sacred words, was enough to silence the noise of everything else. And in that silence you could hear not only the recitation, but your own heart responding to it. What struck me most was how the voice seemed to exist outside of time. It was ancient yet alive. It was foreign yet familiar. It was personal yet vast enough to belong to everyone. The sound was not just heard, it was felt in the bones, in the breath, in the stillness of the soul. And in that realization, I understood the power of the voice is not in its volume, not in its command, but in its ability to touch what lies beneath words themselves. It reminded me that true power does not need to shout. True power whispers in a way that cannot be ignored. What became clear to me in that moment was that this was not only about one faith or one tradition. There was something in the sound that reached beyond boundaries. The words belonged to a specific people, a specific history, and yet the feeling they awakened did not belong to one alone. It was as if the recitation spoke a language older than language itself, a language of the soul. I realized then that all sacred words, in their truest form, are bridges. They remind us that no matter where we come from or what name we give the divine, there is something within us that answers when truth is spoken. You don't need to understand the translation. You don't need to share the background. When you hear it, something deep inside recognizes it, almost as though it has been waiting for that moment of recognition. It is easy for us to focus on differences, to divide ourselves by what we believe or how we worship. But in that sound, there is no division. There is only connection, a reminder that the human heart beats with the same questions, the same longings, the same desire for meaning. And when we encounter the sacred, whether in a church, a mosque, a temple, or under the open sky, it calls to the same place within us. That is the beauty of it. The Qur'an in that moment was not only speaking to those who had grown up with it, it was speaking to me, an outsider, a stranger. And yet it felt as though it knew me, as though it was reminding me that we are not so different after all, that beyond the surface, we are connected by something greater, something eternal. What stayed with me most was not only the sound itself, but what followed after. When the voice fell silent, there was a stillness that remained. It was not an empty silence. It was alive, full, almost sacred. It was the kind of silence you don't find in the world around us, where noise presses in from every direction. This silence was different. It was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of peace. For a moment, my thoughts, always restless, always chasing the next worry, the next task, simply stopped. It felt as if something greater had stepped in, pressing gently on the chaos inside me, asking it to rest. The mind that had been rushing slowed. The heart that had been heavy grew lighter. In that space, nothing else mattered. Not time, not fear, not the endless demands of life. only stillness. And in that stillness, reflection began to rise. Not the shallow kind of reflection that comes and goes, but something deeper, something that searches you. Questions surfaced, not about success or ambition or the trivial things that fill our days, but about meaning, about purpose, about what lies beyond the surface of our existence. It felt as though the recitation had cleared a path inward, a path I had forgotten was there. I realized how little time we give ourselves to simply be, to breathe, to listen, to face the truths we often hide from. The stillness after those words was like standing at the edge of a vast, quiet ocean, small, humbled, yet strangely whole. That moment taught me that silence is not something to be feared. It is a gift, a sanctuary within ourselves, waiting to be entered. And sometimes all it takes is a single voice, a single recitation to open the door to that hidden place. What struck me next was how small I felt. Not small in a way that diminished me, but small in a way that lifted my eyes upward. The words I had heard carried a weight that reminded me of my place in the vastness of existence. They made it clear that no matter how strong, how successful, how proud we may become, we are still fragile beings, finite, temporary, dust in the hands of time. And yet, within that smallness, there was no despair. There was dignity. There was beauty. To be reminded that we are not the center of the universe is not a loss. It is a liberation. It frees us from the illusion that we control everything. It brings us back to gratitude, back to reverence, back to the truth that there is something far greater than us, something that holds all things together. I remember feeling as though I had stepped into the presence of the eternal. It was not about fear. It was about awe. The kind of awe you feel when standing before a mountain range that stretches beyond the horizon or beneath a night sky burning with stars. You know in that instant that you are small, but you also know you are seen. You also know you belong. That is what those words carried. Humility. A humility that softens pride but strengthens the soul. A humility that bends the head but lifts the heart. A humility that whispers, you are not everything, but you are a part of something beyond everything. In that humility, I felt no weakness, only strength. Strength that comes not from control, but from surrender. Strength that comes not from claiming to know it all, but from admitting that there is so much more than we could ever know. And in that moment, I understood. To bow before the divine is not to lose yourself. It is to finally find yourself. What stayed with me long after the sound faded was not only the beauty of what I had heard, but the responsibility it placed on my heart. The encounter was not meant to be locked away as a private memory. It was meant to shape how I look at others, how I listen to them, how I honor what they hold sacred. Because if a voice from a tradition not my own could move me so deeply, then perhaps it was reminding me that truth is not limited to one people, one place, or one path. We live in a world too quick to build walls, too eager to point out differences, too ready to divide what was meant to be united. And yet, in that moment of hearing the Qur'an, I felt no division. I felt connection, a bridge between myself and millions of others who had carried those words in their hearts across centuries. It showed me that respect is not a courtesy, it is a necessity. Without it, we lose the very thing that makes us human. Respect does not mean we must all believe the same. It does not erase our distinctions, nor should it. What it demands of us is simpler and far more difficult: to listen with more than ears, to listen with humility, to see the sacred in another's tradition, and to honor it even when it is not our own. Because when we dare to listen, truly listen, we discover that what we thought divided us was never so great after all. We find that the same longing for peace, for truth, for the divine beats within every heart, and that recognition does not weaken our own faith. It deepens it. It broadens it. It makes us stronger because it teaches us to see the human family as it was meant to be seen, not as strangers, but as companions on the same journey. So I carry that moment with me, not as a story of the past, but as a compass for the future, a reminder that we are called to something higher than suspicion or fear. We are called to understanding, to reverence, to peace. And sometimes all it takes is a single voice reciting words spoken long ago to remind us of the truth we already know. We belong to one another. And so when I think back to that moment, the sound, the stillness, the weight of those words, I know it was more than just an experience. It was an encounter with something eternal. It was a reminder that beyond the noise of our lives, beyond the divisions we create, there is a truth that calls to every human heart. A truth that humbles us, that connects us, that lifts us towards something greater than ourselves. What I heard that day was not simply a recitation. It was an invitation to listen, to reflect, to respect, and to seek peace. An invitation to see the sacred, not only in one tradition, but in the shared longing of all humanity. And if we can hold on to that, if we can listen with open hearts, if we can walk with humility, if we can honor what is sacred to one another, then perhaps the world can be quieter, kinder, more whole. Because in the end, it is not the noise that changes us, it is the voice that speaks to the soul, the voice that calls us back to the truth, the voice that whispers, even now, if only we are willing to hear.